You're listening to the ProcureTech podcast, your weekly show for all that's cooking in the digital procurement space. Yes, we've got the hottest startups, thought leadership, and conversation from visionary industry experts, and definitely no stiff corporate content. I'm your host, James Meads, Procurement Pro, Digital Nomad, and ProcureTech fanboy. And now, here's this week's show. Yes, welcome to another edition of the ProcureTech podcast, your weekly dose of procurement technology goodness. And on this week's show, we're going to be digging into a topic that can often feel a little bit confusing for people that are not experts in this field, but it's an area that is growing immensely quickly in terms of its use cases and what it can do for the procurement field at large. So we're going to be having a conversation today about AI, both defining what it is and what the different uses can be in the procurement space. And then we're going to be deep diving into what my guest on today's show actually does with his company, which is using AI to cleanse and to structure complex data for big organizations. So I would like to introduce today's guest on the podcast, who is Adriano Garibotto, CEO of Creactives. Adriano, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the opportunity.
No, it's great to have you. I've been watching what you've been doing for a while in this space, and something that was really interesting when I was learning a bit more about Creactives' history on your website is that you started off as a cost reduction consultancy, and it'd be really interesting to hear how you evolved, I guess, from being an expense reduction consultancy through to what you're doing now in the AI space with master data.
It's a long story because it starts 20 years ago, but to make it shortly, the consultancy activity we made at that time were very focused on indirect procurement. And we very shortly realized that the indirect procurement is a quite complicated area in terms of variation and quantity of data that you need to process if you really want to get details about the spending and make possible real analytics on that spending. And so we realized that the complexity of the domain, because indirect procurement in the industrial space covers quite different technologies and incredible amount of variations of goods and services. And so doing that activity as consultants and trying to support our clients on how to reduce the cost of MRO, we very quickly realized that a software support that not has to be Excel files and sorting, manual sorting of data, etc., was not the solution, was not possible the solution, and we needed to introduce something more powerful. And so we changed our approach, trying to introduce at that time, very, very early stage artificial intelligence. Before, natural language processing and big data approaches that were at that moment in a very early stage. I'm speaking about 2005, 2006.
Oh, wow. So it's a long time ago when you started. Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. And then we bought a spin-off of the University of Verona, where there was a bunch of very smart guys working on that space. And then we started developing of our own tools. And after 5 years, more or less, around 2010, we decided as a company that could be useful to be concentrated on developing on the tools and try to sell them instead to continue to provide consulting services. And this was the final transformation in terms of company, because at the beginning, our name was Creactive Consulting, and we delete the consulting, and we transform our company in a software company. So this is more or less the story in brief.
A very smart move, I think, given what the market's doing right now. So, I mean, most of us are not computer scientists, obviously, who are going to be listening to this, and AI often to a non-technical person often makes them scratch their head and think, well, what is it? But instead of me asking you what is AI, and I was tempted to do that, instead I'm going to put a different slant on it and say, can you give me a few examples of what AI can do for us in the procurement space?
It's a good question because, I mean, there is a lot of expectation around AI, because it's a buzzword. So people tend to think that AI can be magic and can do everything. But what really it is that AI must be applied to specific fields to provide some solutions. And if you speak about the fields of procurement, the field of procurement is all about answering the four main questions about procurement. So what I buy, from whom I buy, at what price I buy, and who is buying. In a big organization, if you are able to answer quickly in every part of your spending to these four questions, you can say that you are covering and you are really managing your processes. But when you think about complex companies, multinational companies with many ERP system, transactional system, languages, different languages used, etc., answer those questions is not that easy because the data are not complete, the data are complex, they are in multi-language situations, so, and coming from different backend system. So to make possible answering that questions, you need to have a clear understanding of the data. So what that means, harmonization of the data and making possible to make analysis. And this is exactly the space where artificial intelligence can play a strategic role. So making possible the harmonization of the data and make a unique visibility possible from the corporate perspective of the procurement management. And this is the starting point. There are other things, but this is the enabler factor, let me say, that the AI can bring to the procurement space.
Yeah, certainly AI is being used a lot more as well in sourcing as well. There's a lot, not a lot, but there are a few sourcing tools out there now that are leveraging AI as well. I mean, from a human perspective, if we look at procurement professionals, especially maybe those that are involved in more operational or transactional jobs in their nature, they're often maybe resistant or skeptical of AI potentially because of fear, I guess, in terms of having their jobs rendered obsolete. So is there anything that we can do to turn these concerns into something positive, or how can this revolution that we're seeing in terms of how procurement can get quickly access to good data, which previously was virtually impossible, how can we turn this into collaboration with maybe skeptical stakeholders rather than resistance?
It's a change management issue. And obviously the C-levels has to embrace this problem, and they need to configure their organization in a new way. So today, for example, if we think about data preparation to create an RFX process or to buy something, data preparation required a lot of efforts from the procurement people. And this is exactly the space where artificial intelligence can bring more efficiency. So the data preparation could take 80% of the time, and then you have today the dedication of the 20% of the time on the final things and select the suppliers and make the negotiation, etc., etc. So the approach could be completely reversed. So data preparation will be automatically provided by some artificial intelligence tool. And then you have a lot of time to provide a real value for the company, because the data itself is not a value, is an enabler factor that you can automatize. From the human perspective, the value added, and this is exactly the point of the change management. You need to convince the people that they need to transform themselves in the day-by-day activity, not be focused on try to understand and harmonize data, making phone calls because you don't understand something coming from that specific plant, et cetera, and then instead create a real competitive environment and safe from the risk perspective, et cetera, to support the supply chain in the best way. So this is a very change management issue. In the future, the procurement organization organized by category is not anymore something that would be rework. The category management architecture that is the most common one today in the procurement area will be transformed in the near future because of artificial intelligence. But this does not mean that the humans have no role. Simply, the humans has to be reinvented, there is a lack of skills, obviously, and this is again a change management issue where you need to start thinking how to convert your team to this new approach, maybe with obviously some learning, etc.
So I mean, it is an evolution, and as long as the employee, as the individual, is open-minded to change, there will always be a space for them in the organization, I guess is your message. It's just the ones that are maybe too old or too stubborn to learn new skills, and that's perhaps the danger. But certainly for younger people coming into the procurement space, whereas 5-10 years ago the path would have been going into a more tactical or operational procurement role and then slowly working their way up to category manager, what you're saying is that model will probably become obsolete. I think I would certainly agree with you as well.
I'm old enough to remember that 20 years or even a little bit more, procurement was a space in the organization where you send people that are not really good. So it was a sort of so it's condemnation. So when something was assigned to procurement, it was like to say, okay, you are not anymore important for the company. We cannot fire you, so you go to procurement, something like that.
Yeah, no, we joke about it, but especially in European companies, in places like Italy or France or Germany, where it is difficult to fire underperforming employees, then yeah, it's a real problem of what do you do with them. And you go back to MRO, I've got a bit of a history in MRO as well, and it was the same thing there, that often if someone was not capable of working in production because of an injury, they would make them the stores manager, and the problem was they didn't really know anything about inventory management or purchasing, but they were in that position and they were the custodian of a lot of inventory. So yeah, I get that. So I mean, that's all great, but to what extent can AI do all of this data classification and do a lot of the background work to enable, like you said, the optimal scenario where, procurement is spending 80% of the time on the actual work they should be doing rather than the data preparation? Because I think I've interviewed a couple of data people on the previous series of the podcast, and they all pretty much said the same thing, that, AI will get you part of the way there or even most of the way there for some of the more optimistic ones that I interviewed, but all of them agreed that you're not going to get 95% accuracy through AI right now. So both with what you're doing at Creactives and looking into the future, how long do you think it will take for us to get there, or will we never get there just because that final 20, 30, 40% will always need a knowledge worker to interpret what the AI is telling them?
It's a real critical question, because when you say AI, okay, AI could be a lot of things also in procurement. So it's not a single space in procurement where AI can be applied. So, for example, we know companies that make magic things regarding creation of digital twins of the organization. So when you move something procurement, you immediately can see what happened in the last warehouse place, and I don't know where, and with all the possible consequences in all the organization. Magic things with a lot of powerful connections, etc., etc. But or more simply, things like source to pay platform that automatize all the process, etc., etc. So artificial intelligence can bring a lot of things, but the problem is like any complex engine, what is relevant is the fluid that goes in. And the more complicated and more sophisticated is the engine, the more sophisticated and complete should be the fluid that goes in. And which is the fluid? The fluid is data. So if we make a comparison on the combustion engine, at the beginning, the combustion engine would use a very simple petrol, whatever. They can run with this kind of very primitive fuels. Right now, there is no engine that is able to run with those kind of fuels. They require specific fuels, very well prepared fuels that we can find everywhere. But was a long run. The power of those motors were weak compared with the ones we can have today, and this is more really related with the kind of fuel you use. And I use this comparison to say that what is the fluid inside of the procurement? Data. So you need good data from the very beginning, because you cannot expect a good result if the fluid that start the process is not good enough.
Yeah, just like you can't build a city on a swamp, or on unstable ground. It's the same thing, isn't it? You have to have a strong foundation to be able to build that up. So I mean, we've spoken a little bit about data. We've spoken a little bit about P2P and about sourcing platforms. What are your thoughts on using AI for tail spend? Particularly with things like guided buying, which has become more common now as more companies adopt platforms like SAP S/4HANA as an ERP system. To what extent can AI be used to do that, and what are some of the pitfalls and some of the benefits there?
There was a sort of trade-off in the past regarding that. So one of the approaches was, okay, who cares? Is the 5% of my turnover, even if I make big mistakes there, even of 20% in some specific area, it will remain a little part of my business. So I really don't take care, and possibly all the people can do what they want and control only the mega aggregation of the cost. I control only that. So if in my budget the tail spend should be 3% of my turnover, I control that remain the 3%. What happened in there? No way. But when you realize that most of the transactions, for example, for accounting are coming from that 3%, you really realize that probably you are spending more money from the management perspective of that spend instead of the real goods and services you buy in that space. So
exactly, yeah, it's a huge. It might not drive savings, but the amount of the amount of resource it takes up with things like accounts queries and delivery problems and quality issues, each additional vendor that you have is is one additional supplier that's waiting to go bankrupt or put you on stop for not paying invoices or delivering late or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah. So the new approach is okay. We need to take care about the process. So process should be automatization, and then with the big advancement of the retail, the idea should be we can apply the same logic of the B2C to the B2B. So now there are in this space people like Amazon Business, for example, that are pushing, but also traditional players try to transform themselves as a marketplace too. So Sapariba has Subbuy, etc., etc. So there is a movement towards this area where the B2C approach could be applicable. But we are not really in the same situation, because when you speak of these kind of things, there is a fear. There is a fear connected with something that we have already discussed, because it was a time-consuming activity before, and then automatizing them, the people tends to say, in the procurement area, tends to say, okay, I have no role right now. What I have to do? If everybody can go to Amazon Business and buy whatever they want, what I have to do. But it's not really like that, because the optimization space in terms of prices, in terms of SLA, in terms of impacts in your supply chain, in case of disruption, etc., are already there, because you are a business, you are in the business, you are in the production of goods, etc., etc., and even a stupid O-ring can stop a big turbine. So there is already a big space, but this space requires data. So you cannot understand what would be any impact in that phase if you don't have clear data. So automatization is good, obviously, nothing to do with, nothing to say with that. But at the end of the day, to really have this area of the spending under management, again, data is crucial. Yeah. And this is quite complicated data, because if you speak about SKUs components or MRO components, probably you can have a very good understanding because there are also repetition of the procurement, etc. But when you speak about tail, are spot buying. And spot buying, they don't have clear patterns by definition. So analyze this kind of data is not such easy using traditional approach like Excel spreadsheet or making analysis how much I spend by supplier or things like that. You really
exactly. Yeah, I mean when 40-50% of a company's spend is on non-inventoried items on free text PO, and a lot of it's not repeatable spend, it's no, I've been in that situation, and trying to make sense of the data is I won't say impossible, but extremely difficult. Yeah. So, I mean, how do you convince, I mean, like, this is probably $1 million question. How do you convince a CFO or a CEO of an enterprise level organization to invest in data quality? Because especially if we look at non-repeatable or tail spend or MRO or, anything that's not, raw materials or expensive professional services, it's difficult to promise them an immediate or guaranteed return on investment. So what typically is your sort of persuasion criteria when you're trying to sell what you do?
I need to have here a different approach in my answer, because it's a double approach. So first of all, about quality of the data, there is a progressive maturity in the market. So 5 years ago, speak about quality, data quality was all about ETL processes, so extract, transform, and load processes to make migrations and things like that. So people were not really aware about the impacts, and was quite difficult to sell something in that space. And so we decided that you have to have not only the possibility to cleanse and harmonize data, but also specific verticals, solutions for specific problem, and made possible to make right calculations of ROI. So specifically, we in Creactives, we have defined that the most important part of the story is related with material and services master data. Material and services master data for indirect procurement specifically is a vast area. And we have developed there a vertical solution to manage this kind of information that is called TAM, Technical Attribute Management, that made possible to really manage all the master data coming from any material and service master data coming from many different ERPs in many languages, etc., and have an harmonized point of view and make possible the duplications and make possible the safe creation of new items in the future with avoiding the creation of duplicates, etc., etc. In that space, create an ROI, it's possible. In fact, we did, for example, with Forrester, so an independent, we take a case of a client, big client of us, in the power production, one of the biggest players in the world, and we made Forrester made an exact calculation of the ROI in that specific opportunity. But on top of that, they made also a model on how to calculate, taking rough data, the possible ROI of a project like this in another company. And this is more and more, let me say, a basic requirement to make investments today. So everybody is concerned about ROI. Is the first question that the C-level people are asking to the people that are involved in operation. So how much money I get back from that investment? And if you apply AI in, let me say, to generic space, obviously ROI calculation is quite hard to do. But when you apply to a specific solution like TAM, yeah, you can make calculations. So because you can make a calculation of expected calculation, for example, of the reduction of the inventories. And this is money compared with other money that you will spend for that. And the returns are amazing. There is no case that is below 500% of ROI.
Wow, so that's a great insight. So to be able to get that ROI, you really need to focus on a specific usage case or a specific application, and then it's much easier to convince. It's a shame actually if I guess that Forrester report is behind a paywall, but it would be really interesting to see it actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So final question, Adriano, and this one's really easy. How can people get in touch with you if they would like to learn more about what you do? You've also got a new ebook on this topic as well, so I can link to that in the show notes too.
Thank you, because this ebook is, let me say, the result of a lot of thinking about the same thing we have discussed this morning. Obviously, more let me say, less disordered than my verbal explanation today. So I really appreciate that you can link the ebook. Well, we have our website, creactives.com, and you can write directly info at creactives.com, and we will keep in touch immediately with the people that could be interested in our solutions.
And we will link to the website and the email address in the show notes too. Adriano, thank you very much for coming on. I've certainly learned a lot from today's discussion, and I hope you listening at home have done too. Keep in touch. All the best for the future, and good luck with your new plans.
Thank you for the opportunity, and good luck all of you, and stay safe.
Wow, so some great insights there from Adriano around how AI can help you in different areas of procurement, but especially around data, categorization, harmonization, and cleansing, which ultimately is the foundation for every good digitization strategy and efficiency and productivity gains. So thank you very much for listening to the ProcureTech podcast. If you like what we do, then don't forget to subscribe where you listen to your podcasts, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts so as we can float to the top of the procurement podcast rankings and reach more people. That's it for today. I will see you again next week, or listen to you again, or hear you again next week. What am I talking about? Until then, stay safe, look after yourselves wherever you are, and bye for now.